XRP ETFs are live. We have CME futures that are about to go live. We have institutions gearing up to flood the market with their liquidity to purchase XRP. If you own XRP or you're still sitting on the sidelines, now is the time to start paying attention. So let's dive in, see what's happening, why it matters, and how it could reshape everything we know about digital assets. All right, so if you've been living under a rock, then maybe you don't know that there have been 17 different ETFs filed for XRP. We have one that's live for futures. It's a leverage trading XRP ETF. But what is an exchange traded fund or an ETF? Basically, it allows qualified capital, things in 401ks or pension plans or other large institutions, a really easy way to access participating in digital assets. It makes it easy for Wall Street to come in. It provides a wrapper. So they have regulation, custody, and compliance, all that hold the underlying assets. So people don't have to figure out the wallets or how to custody this stuff, and you know it's safe. And it allows regular investors to gain exposure without having to understand all the complicated stuff that goes along with crypto. And that's why we've seen such a huge rise in Bitcoin in the recent year. You know, the ETFs for that, spot ETFs were launched January 10th of 2024, which was even prior to the halving last year. And we've seen a huge run up in price. It was at an all-time high even before the halving took place, which is very unusual. No matter what you say, this time is actually different. So why is this important? Well, again, it allows the institutions a really safe way to enter the market. It provides super easy exposure, and it opens it up to a global audience for capital. So ETFs remove the technical barriers, and you don't need a crypto wallet. You just need a brokerage account. So this allows XRP to be available to a completely different caliber of investor than what it has been in the past. So let's talk about where we are. What's been approved and what's going to be approved? Well, currently there's one ETF it's actually available for trade. It's been live since April 8th, and that's XRP is the ticker. And it's a 2x leverage XRP exposure ETF. The one that was approved this weekend here on April 27th is the ProShares XRP futures ETF. And there's actually three involved with that. So they have ultra short, and then short. And again, these are all futures ETFs. They don't actually need to hold XRP. That's the spot ETFs. And we'll get to that here in a minute. On the first day of trading, there was $200,000 in opening trading volume on XRP. So still kind of nascent. Not a whole lot of people know about it, but I think the people that are in with their qualified capital on that ETF may do very well. We've already seen some price appreciation since that one opened up. So ProShares, if you don't know, they are a major ETF issuer, and they were known for the futures ETFs for Bitcoin and Ethereum. And now that we have futures ETFs, and we've seen that those are getting approved, these are kind of the stepping stone towards spot ETFs being approved. So the difference between spot ETFs and futures is they can trade futures in the market. They don't have to actually buy the underlying asset, or spot, they're actually required to back the shares with the underlying asset. So they will have to actually buy a bunch of the underlying asset and then hold it. And that's what's caused the scarcity on the market for Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I think we'll see something very similar for XRP. So the SEC has moved quickly to approve these XRP ETFs that are the futures ones. And history tells us what happens next is that the spot ETFs will follow. So when could that happen? When could we see these spot ETFs go live? Well, Grayscale, their latest date that they can approve or deny Grayscale spot ETF is May 22nd. So, and that's just right after the futures market goes live for the CME on May 19th. CME is the largest, most respected derivatives exchange in the world. Futures markets provide a regulated way for price discovery, and it's a key requirement for most spot ETF approvals by the SEC. So I don't know that we're going to get the spot ETFs approved before May 19th, but it's pretty interesting to me that they've announced this just a few days previous or prior to their deadline for Grayscale on the 22nd. So they're going to approve or deny it, but I think we're going to have the futures market in place before that's a go live here. So here in the next 30 days, we should have approval for the spot ETFs, which is pretty exciting. So this is basically a check mark or a checkbox that the SEC and other people want in place before, big players like we'll talk about in a second, BlackRock and Fidelity and Vanguard could potentially move into the market. And that would provide more liquidity, tighter spreads, and better pricing stability for XRP once the futures market is in place. We have futures markets now. We've got Bitfinex and some other Binance. There's a few futures market, but not in a regulated marketplace like the CME. And this is going to provide a lot of depth in the order book and a way to hedge for these large institutions. And it signals that Wall Street is primed and ready for XRP to be used in this capacity. So when Bitcoin futures went live on the CME back in 2017, that was kind of the tipping point, and XRP is now stepping into that same moment. But I don't think it's going to take quite as long as it did for Bitcoin from 2017 all the way until 2024 for the spot ETFs. I think the roadmap is pretty clear. And now that we have a new head of the SEC, Paul Adkins, in there, I think that this could happen much, much faster. And we have bipartisan approval and the want for this asset class to go mainstream. I don't know that we're going to get anything before May 19th. Again, I think that it's a prerequisite that you need the futures market for the CME to go live before we're going to see the spot ETFs approvals. Now, again, Grayscale's application, its deadline is May 22nd. I think you could see some type of approval for the spot ETFs between May 19th and May 22nd. And if they approve one, they're going to approve them all. We might also see, some larger players step in. So let's talk about the people that have filed the spot ETFs. You got Grayscale, you got Bitwise, you got 21 shares, and there's others with a total of 7 or 8 spot ETFs. Ripple's SEC settlement hasn't been publicly announced yet, and it's not on the SEC's website, but basically that's over with. There's been a resolution, and you also have the 60-day duration ending about the same time as well. So very, very good timing on their part. So if the spot ETFs were approved, it opens the floodgates. We're talking about trillions of dollars from institutional capital that could now be allocated directly to XRP. So let's talk about the big boys. They all move really slow, and then they move all at once. XRP futures and the ETFs are a signal that they've been waiting for. BlackRock, Fidelity, Vanguard. Vanguard didn't do any of the Bitcoin ETFs, by the way. I don't think they did any of the Ethereum ETFs either, but I think they could be in the ring here for the XRP ETFs just because of the connections they have with Ripple and BlackRock also. So I think once we see BlackRock file and throw their hat in the ring, again, probably going to be after the 19th. Could be before, but I think it's going to be after the CME futures go live here in May. And they were one of the forefront people, right? BlackRock was at the forefront of Bitcoin. They were at the forefront of Ethereum. And I don't think they're going to be left behind here for XRP. But again, I do think that it's going to be after the CME futures get launched, because that's going to bring large players a lot of credibility, liquidity, and the mainstream acceptance that they're going to need to feel comfortable moving in. BlackRock manages 10 trillion plus in assets. That's a lot of money that they could be allocating over here. And obviously it wouldn't be the whole thing, but they would move a portion, which they have. They're the largest Bitcoin ETF holder. They've actually just moved their custody over to Anchorage, which is our partner at Digital Wealth Partners for our clients, where we manage their digital assets and hold those in custody and work with them to generate returns and borrow against their XRP. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go check that out at digitalwealthpartners.net. But BlackRock moving in, man, it would force advisors, pension funds, and sovereign wealth funds to start considering XRP at scale. And that's why I'm just really proud that we're way ahead of the curve here. But it would bring XRP out of just being a niche play into the mainstream finance world, which is where we've kind of seen Bitcoin and Ethereum sit at this moment. Most of the advisors we talk to and other players, that's where the liquidity is. That's what they're concerned with. XRP is kind of an afterthought, but I don't think that it will be once these ETFs get launched. So everybody's favorite question, what does it mean for price? How's it going to affect the price? Well, if it's any reflection of how, Bitcoin's price was affected or Ethereum's price was affected, we should see some type of supply shock. You've got the ETFs, you've got the futures, which both of those create significantly greater demand and less available supply. So you've got more trading volume and more institutions hodling, just like retail is. Providing stronger liquidity makes XRP more viable for large-scale global payments, which is exactly the use case that they've been propagating, for the past 10 years with RippleNet. And now that we have some CBDCs starting to be issued on the XRPL, at least in pilot, you got Brazil that's come on board. They've also got an ETF that'll go live here this week for XRP as well. And we've got an ETP in Europe. So it's not like this is foreign. There have been a few other jurisdictions that have gone ahead and approved this and moved it in, but US markets are the go-to, right? Like they are the ones that validate something. And once we see it here, I think that's when you're going to see a lot of liquidity move in. So price action historically lags the ETFs a little bit. You saw a rise in gold, significantly after the ETFs were approved, but it did lag, whereas Bitcoin actually started rising previous. I mean, I think we've already seen XRP's price start to rise because of these ETFs, institutions starting to stockpile XRP over the counter, and with TWAP or VWAP averaging into the market. And that's why we've seen sustained volume here around $2.20 for XRP. But when we see them move in droves and more people announce a spot ETF, including, I think, BlackRock, you could see a major supply shock, which would cause XRP's price to go parabolic for a period of time. And once there's enough liquidity in it, well, then you can start moving things globally for, international payments and remittance and back-end settlement of larger financial markets, which is what it's intended for. And the XRP family has been patient for years. And this isn't just hype. I believe that it's the infrastructure that's been built for the next generation of the financial system. And once there's enough liquidity there, that's when we'll start seeing sustained volume and the use case that we've all been waiting for. Subscribe, like, stay sharp, and we'll see you guys on the next one.